Can everybody hear me?
Yes, leader.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's just that everybody's frozen on my screen, so I just wanted to check that at least you could hear me. I don't know why that's happening, but anyway, right. The other thing we have to say and apologise for is a lack of translation facilities this morning. Wednesday is the day that apparently the translator is not available, so apologies, and we'll avoid Wednesdays in future. But so unfortunately, we are on English only today. So my apologies for that. But if we make a start, I'm just thinking what's happening here. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you, leader.
Sorry. Thank you. It's just I think it's probably my end. Gavin, thank you very much, and thanks for attending. And I quite understand. Right, for your latest arrival. So thank you very much for coming. Welcome and apologies. Let's start with welcome and apologies. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair. I've received apologies from Christine Harley, HM Prisons Probation Service, and then colleagues from Welsh Governments, Duncan Hamer, Anne Watkin and Rhys Morris. Apologies from Claire Bryan, Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and then for Powys Teaching Health Board, Hayley Thomas, Chief Executive Officer, but I believe we have representation.
Yeah.
And then also from Fiona Valentine, Chloe Barrell, and then from Powys County Council, Caroline Butler and Mike Grice.
Okay, thank you. Are there any others that people would like to offer us apologies? If not, we can move on. No, great. So we'll move to the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 3 to 6, and I will need a proposer and seconder for those. If everybody is happy that they are a true record of what took place. If everybody is, if there's any issue on the minutes that you wish to raise now, please do so before we adopt them. No. Okay. So could I have a proposer, please, for those minutes? Anybody happy to propose?
We've got Ewan, Chair.
Oh, thank you, Ewan. My apologies. Thank you. Could I have a seconder, please? Anybody?
Yes. Yeah. Councillor. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Gavin. So proposed and seconded. All those in favour of adopting the minutes, all those who are entitled to vote, and I have to admit I'm never quite sure who is, but so all those entitled to vote, please do so.
I think certainly the statutory partners, Chair.
Yes.
And you can represent one of the statutory partners.
I can, so I can vote for it. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. I'll take silence as acquiescence, so that's they're adopted. Thank you very much. Right, move on to we have a presentation from the Centre for Digital Public Services. A very warm welcome to you, and apologies that we had to postpone you before, didn't we? And you've come back to us, which is great.
Don't worry at all.
Thank you, Myra.
Absolutely fine. Great. And I was just going to say, people often wonder whether I'm Myra or Harriet, and I'll just let you know that I'm Myra, and we're a job chair, and we're one half of the Chief Executive Officers at the Centre for Digital Public Services that you may or may not have heard of, but hopefully I can give you an introduction and take some questions. We circulated, Connor kindly circulated the presentation with the agenda. I suggest actually that I just talk and then I can see your faces and just summarize what's in the presentation, or we can I can share and we can refer to slides if need be. I'm really happy to take questions as I go along, or alternatively we can discuss further at the end. So Chair, is it okay if I just take sort of 5 minutes just to say a little bit about us and kick off the conversation? Would that work?
Absolutely. And I think as you say, we've all had a presentation, so we can scroll down in our own time, so to speak, if that's okay. Has anybody not got the presentation? Right, everybody is happy, I think, so far away. So thank you very much.
Okay, so I'll try and give a summary. So as I say, we're the Centre of Digital Public Services, and you'll probably hear about us as well, referred to as CDPS. Set up at the start of this Senedd in response to Welsh Government concerns about the quality of digital services in Wales. You're probably aware of the digital strategy at the start of this Senedd that has 6 missions. And our raison d'etre is around the first mission, which is designing better digital services around user need, which are simpler, secure, and convenient. When we say user need, what this really is about is users connecting and communicating with all different wings and parts of government, usually to access some form of public service, and we need them to interact with us to enable that service to function. So the kind of user need idea is the burden that we put on users to interact with us to enable them to access our services, because people sometimes get confused about that. And if we design them really well in terms of that service design, we will deliver the service more effectively, and they will have a better experience and be able to interact with that. And a kind of classic example of that are people who are trying to claim benefits, who, as we all know, there'll be unclaimed benefits because actually our services are designed so that they're not very accessible and people in extreme crisis can't access their benefits. So that's the kind of thing that we're trying to change. CDPS is really about building capacity in the public sector, and that includes sponsored bodies and third sector organisation, and improve our skills and capability to work with digital and data to deliver better services. So my first plea for you is, as you're thinking about your services, is by default, if possible, to be thinking about how digital and data can help you improve your services. And when you're dealing with, and you are executive officers and running your services, you kind of think about digital and data in that way as an integrated part of service improvement, as opposed to kind of the guys down the corridor sitting in IT or the digital post-it guys. This is all about improving our services. And obviously the biggest transformation, or a really important transformation since 2018, and if in the new Senedd there's a new digital strategy, is AI. And I'll come to that at the end, because you can't talk about digital and data now without talking about AI. So in the presentation, there's one slide on some of the challenges we face, and they'll all be, I think, completely recognisable to you. And all of those challenges remain now that we're 4 years into this term. So it's all challenges around skills, budgets, technology, and service definition and service ownership. And I'd include in that ways of working and how we conceive digital and how we deliver projects. And those are problems that I see across the public sector and also shared in Gov UK and in Whitehall as well, and are very prevalent in Wales, particularly around budgets. And there's no need for me to come here and tell any of you that. And also around skills and capability and capacity for change. That's something I've come up a lot against in the last few years, this incredibly difficult challenge of how can we change and run really tight BAU at the same time. In terms of our services, I would divide kind of the ways of working at CDPS into 2 separate areas to simplify in terms of what we can offer you. We work on the kind of what I would label as capability building, and then also in some project delivery. I'm just going to speak about that capability building offer, and then also a little bit about our delivery projects. In terms of the capability building, all of which is free, and all of which your staff are entitled to, we run a kind of connect service, which is around communities of practice, which may be a concept that's familiar to some of you. Communities of practice are when practitioners come together, learn from each other in that network, share case studies, share problems, share examples, and are really good for your kind of mid-level and junior staff, building confidence. They're free to join. You can just join that community. They're mainly online. Come together at a lunch and learn session, go to webinars, share your problems. Really good for staff who are sort of wanting to grow into digital roles. If you've got business analysts who might become user researchers, or technologists that are interested in learning more about digital, really recommend our communities of practice and our lunch and learn sessions. We're also doing leadership training, that's also free, and we're running those across Wales in a hybrid online and face-to-face. Really, really good for senior leaders or service owners, your kind of mid-level management tier, if they want to develop kind of again into digital leadership roles. And also if you've got senior leaders who just want to kind of be brought up to speed and understand more about working in the digital world and build their confidence. The people that I've seen really doing well in that kind of cohort are your sort of up and coming middle management talent that you want to develop into leadership roles. And it's cross-sector as well. So you get the networks afterwards across health and education and different areas of the public sector. And then kind of free and available to everyone are what we call standards and guidance. And people tend to be a bit scared by the word standards and think this is just another sort of burden that we're going to place on you, but it's really guidance for people about how to work when you're trying to improve your digital services. And we take those from the UK GDS government, but also developed for Wales, taking into account the Future Generations Act and the requirement around bilingualism. And then finally, we have some digital professionals who work on delivery projects. And at the moment, our main delivery projects are around planning, delivery of benefits across Wales, and also working on neurodiversity and waiting list management around neurodiversity. I really want to encourage people, particularly local authority colleagues, please, 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 can you support our planning work? I had a show and tell yesterday with Reg Kirkpatrick, who's Director of Planning at Welsh Gov. Powys is not one of our early adopters. We've got 3 local authorities who are early adopters. We really want to encourage more local authorities to come on board. It's a super project. We're just working on the pre-application process at the moment, as well as the data infrastructure and the integration between local authorities and Welsh Gov. We really, really need local authorities to come on board, and also national parks to engage so that we can improve planning. Our delivery projects this year are very linked into First Minister priorities, and planning is one of those, and streamlining and improving the planning application process. So any local authority colleagues, I really, really want to encourage that. Emma, hello. Do you want to come in?
If I may, Chair, is that okay? Yeah, I've actually already responded to Reg through discussions to say that Powys would absolutely be part of any pilot around the planning, because we're particularly interested with the new system that we're bringing in and AI. So Myra, yes. Absolutely, Powys would be more than happy to engage very early.
Wonderful, that's just great. I'll follow up on that this morning. That's really, really good news. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's just great. And as I say, I got incredibly excited. I started looking at some of the prototypes yesterday, which were being demonstrated. We've got 3 early adopters at the moment. So if we can expand that group, and for me, of course, there's nothing like actually your own networks recommending to each other. So as much as I say it, it's not till, so that's great. Thank you, Emma, I'll follow up. And there's also benefits work as well, which is trying to improve benefits take up across Wales following the launch of the Charter. I think over a year ago now, and that's also moving forward. And the neurodiversity project is cross-sectorial and is a data management tool to enable improving case management across sectors and better information sharing. So I'm hoping that potentially health boards are aware of that and will be onboarding to that. Some of that is contingent, I'm afraid, on Welsh Gov continuing to run their wider neurodiversity programme. But that, again, that's linked into the challenge of bringing down waiting list times. Just on AI, just to finish on that, we have an AI standards group alongside a wider standards group. I'm not sure if we've got representation from Powys on there. I know Paul Funnell is the CDO at Powys Council, who's very good and supportive in general. Just the kind of things that we're really looking at in terms of AI recommendations at the moment. I'm assuming that I'm speaking to kind of executive officers and councillors. I do really recommend that you know what's going on within your organisation, that you have some kind of register or some kind of group within your department that has knowledge of what is going on. A lot will be going on. It's probably at the prototyping stage and probably small scale, but it is sensible to know, if possible, where people are experimenting. Our success with AI will be entirely dependent on the quality of our data and our interoperability of our data. For me personally, sitting on the outside, I would love to see more data sharing between local authorities. I know, Powys, you work quite closely with Ceredigion and get a lot of support there. You know, those conversations around data will be what decides how will be one component of how effective we are with AI. We can offer training in AI as well. We're going to develop a register of trainers that we would recommend. You know, really, really important that people take advantage of training. And where we are at the moment across Wales in general, what I'm seeing is some process productivity gains. So we're tend to take current processes and apply it to problems and blockers within those processes, and that at the moment is releasing some productivity gains. At present, that's not leading to headcount reduction. What it's leading to is people refocusing their work, you know, social workers kind of being able to spend more time with clients and less time doing admin. We've got a lot of prototypes, so if you are prototyping, it's really good that we can know about that. Use of Copilot is pretty widespread now, so I'd expect to see Copilot adoption and pretty safe and pretty not low key exactly, but that's the kind of baby slopes, if you like. And you know, there's good sharing between local authorities around Copilot, and also obviously enormous work in health and diagnostics, which are really racing ahead as well. But I do recommend that as much as possible at your executive level, you have visibility and knowledge and come to the sharing forums across Wales to share on what's going on with AI as well. And that's just a brief sort of very high level canter through, but you've got the slides which will give you a more coherent narrative of how we work and who we are as well. And I'm here to take any questions, obviously.
No, well, thank you very much, Joe. That's really, really interesting, and I'm glad you've signed up one recruit already, so that's good. Are there any questions? I'm sure Mary will answer anything around this area, a lot of which, of course, for people like me, is a mystery. So I'm really interested to listen to it. Ewan, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Myra, for that. Really interesting. Forgive me if I'm not on the right lines here, but I was just picking up on the capability building offer, and I'm not sure if you were in on the call when I was chatting with the Chair right at the start about the current position with regard to wildfires going across the country in Wales, and some significant fires burning there. But we've been thinking for a while now about, in terms of development of a reactive approach to those wildfires, and they're not just a fire issue. Then they're about land management generally and different approaches. But community resilience, community cohesion are becoming key part of that. And I know there are some groups already set up in different parts of Wales via WhatsApp groups, etc., with their communities where they manage the land, certainly close to their properties. I'm just thinking of a bigger platform, because it's going to become a key part, as I say, going forward. Yes, we'll react to fires, we'll continue reacting to fires, but if communities can look after those boundaries close to their properties, then that would be of huge benefit to everyone. So in terms of that rural-urban interface, is that something that capability building offer would fit into? And as I say, forgive me if I'm on the wrong lines, and but it's just something that could be developed as a platform, is, I guess, the question.
It's a really, really brilliant example, because the other way of looking at this is saying this service is going to be so totally different, isn't it? Because what I'm hearing you saying, if I've understood you correctly, is a traditional way of dealing with this is being transformed by technological advances and the fact that your communities are taking responsibility and are effectively forming an early alert and doing management through digital tools and spreading their information. So I suppose I would want to stand back a bit and say, actually, this is going to be a very different service. The fire service is going to be, I mean, it's using rather cliched language, but it's going to be transformed by these technological advances. So how do we redesign this service and make use of this? So it's and then you get into the question of, well, how do we do this, you know, and whether you do it little by little by iterating and doing small scale examples and pilots of this, whilst you simultaneously kind of do the bigger picture of, actually, this is going to mean that our alert services are different. It's going to mean our response is different. And, you know, even though your ultimate fulfillment is going to be person, you know, on the ground, as exactly as you're talking about, the whole wraparound end-to-end service is going to be very different. So for me, it's a kind of service redesign question, and then how do you eat the elephant, you know, stage by stage by stage. But if you've got kind of people thinking about this, that would be really good people to start coming on kind of training courses, because it's about reimagining, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. I'll pick that up outside then. Thank you.
No, thank you. Yeah, it's good, really good issue. Carl.
Yeah, thanks, James. And thank you, Myra. Really interesting. I'm Carl. I'm the chair of the health board in Powys. So what I'm sitting here thinking is, I've not been aware of you before, and so that for me is an intriguing question in itself. So I'm interested in where you. So I can see from your background that you're hosted by Welsh Government. Are you a government-sponsored body? Are you an arm's length entity? Now, of course, you know, in the health world, we have DHCW, we have Health Technology Wales. So again, I'm thinking, you know, how is it, you know, so what do you do that they don't do, and how, if at all, do you work with them, and why aren't you on our landscape? Why or at least you know, Mez is here. She's probably telling me that things look very different from where she sits. But yeah, it's that kind of awareness, really. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's so I think one of the challenges that we've faced is, although Wales is a small country and, you know, the public sector here is big but small, if you see what I mean, you know, small compared to the kind of Whitehall apparatus. So we could have kind of started working anywhere, if you like, you know. There's so many projects that need to be done and so much work that needs to be done. So we did do work with DHCW. We did start working with DHCW around projects where we were adding that kind of user-centered design, more agile delivery, less waterfall, much smaller, much more iterative, much more fast-paced. We haven't done so many recently, partly because it was difficult to interface into DHCW because they're big waterfall programs. They tend to be 4 or 5 years long. A lot of them were quite mature. So we did some around maternity health records, and actually we got quite a long way with some where we were going to roll out with health boards and start. And I was keen to do that because there's an opportunity to kind of customize things for health boards, but also deliver locally and get that sweet spot between what's local and what's national. But in the end, we've concentrated our firepower a bit more into the Welsh Government space, to be honest, because it's easier, and we have to look at, you know, if you're running 3 or 4 major projects, major in our scale, where do we focus those to have most impact and to move fastest? And we did do some work with DHCW, but you know, I've had to make quite pragmatic decisions about which projects to select, basically.
Thanks, Carl, and thanks, Myra. First, Mez, also from the Health Board, and then Liz from National Park.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks, Myra, for your presentation. Sort of helpful, really. Just following on from, you know, Carl's sort of conversation, really. I'm sorry, I should say I'm Executive Director of Public Health, so I'm really interested in the population and element, really. And one of your missions is around digital inclusion and sort of skills. Rural Powys, inclusion into digital apps. absolutely key for our population, and also within the health board sort of ageing workforce as well, who are residents in our community. So just wondering, in terms of space, in terms of examples would be technology aided care, you know, sort of self-care, sort of the gender really. What sort of offer would there be then in the communities, probably linked to Pavo? I can't see Claire on here today, in terms of offering training within our communities to residents. You know, as we modernise our services, how do we actually take the population with us as well to make sure we don't widen inequalities, both in access and in health and society?
Yeah, so I have to be really honest here. My kind of end of the equation is on the actual government or organisation services. So sort of our responsibility is to improve and make as accessible as possible the service itself, rather than doing the community-based inclusion and training. It's a real problem though, and I recognise the problem that you're articulating, because the more, as we all know, the more you do online, the more significant the likelihood of exclusion for those people who aren't enabled for whatever reason, and obviously there are many variables to be online. So our focus is very much that first digital mission, which is the actual service provision itself, and how that's the most accessible that it can be and as simple as possible. I do sit on a digital inclusion working group, with, not chaired by Hamish Lang. It's really difficult. I think it's really difficult, and those programs have been struggling to keep their funding as well. But that, in terms of intervention with your local citizens, that's I have to be really honest and say that's not an area that we work in terms of the digital strategy and mission for Wales. We just focus on mission 1.
Thanks, Mez. And just before I bring Liz in, just to say Claire from Pavo has put a sort of useful addition to Ewan's point around community resilience in the chat. So we'll just draw members' attention to that. Liz, please.
Thanks, it's actually Simone, but we're double act today.
So
Hi, it's fine. Simone Al-Thomas, I'm Director for Nature and Climate at Banner Brycheiniog, Brecon Beacons National Park. Thank you for that. It was really interesting. I think I'm going to sign up for a lot of your courses. One of the things I just wanted to flag was we're working really closely with Powys on planning. So if there's something that we could do there, I don't have planning in my portfolio, but speaking on behalf of Gareth, I'm sure he'd be really interested to follow up, and I can make that link. And then really following on from Ewan's point around the wildfires, we've all signed up to the Wildfires Charter, and there's a sort of commitment within that to start mapping and looking at how we can proactively manage land to reduce wildfires. But thinking about the public, all the public services that are here, and a lot of the work that we do is how we bring all that data together. We're all developing geospatial mapping, trying to look at what we're doing where and how we can ground truth it and all the different layers and so on. We can't all at the moment access each other's data, and of course we're all in reinventing separate wheels and then can't cross them. So if there's any, I don't know if it's number 2, 3, 4, 5 or one of your other missions, but at some point something that would help us to do that, I think, would be transformation in terms of how we can integrate services and deliver against some of the sort of wider challenges we're facing, particularly around nature and climate from my perspective, because these really need to be integrated, and we just can't at the moment. We don't have the data. So there's a bit of a plea for help at some point.
Yes, and I'm probably speaking out of turn, but I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase this. I was really aware that when we faced the challenge of resettlement of Ukrainians coming into Wales, what were previously perceived as barriers to data sharing were addressed because of the crisis that we faced. So, i.e., people who had previously refused to share data had to share data because people needed to be resettled in different local authorities from where they were arriving and having contact with different agencies. So part of my advice would be, sorry, I'm really sorry to say this, it sounds really inappropriate, but I'm going to say it, never waste a crisis or whatever. So if you are facing a very challenging, horrendous situation, which it sounds like you are, that is a great opportunity to make the case for really effective data sharing, to give you the backbone to prevent that crisis in the future, because people are prepared to take risks and break rules when they recognise the scale of a problem that they're facing. And So the kind of data sharing that you're talking about, cross-institutional, which is often perceived as being really difficult, sometimes seems to miraculously fade away when a really strong case is made, because a greater emergency is facing, different departments, and you can come together. So I would just say, yeah, and also we have tended to interpret GDPR in ways that have prevented us data sharing, which ultimately are not necessary. We can be bolder with our data sharing, and it will empower us for the future. And be confident, because and we're going to need it. Yeah.
Thank you. Really helpful.
Indeed, indeed. And again, Claire's puts another useful addition in the chat around what happened during COVID. And of course, we see the same thing with, see what used to be called serious child practice reviews. Now, when almost inevitably after every child practice review, there's criticism of the lack of data sharing, and it's a perennial problem, isn't it? But of course, it is always the case that in an emergency, data share, the restrictions fall away, and or should fall away, put it like that. Okay, thank you, Myra. Really interesting. I've got nobody else showing they wish to speak at the minute or ask a question. So it remains to me to thank you sincerely for coming today. Again, apologies for having bumped you off the previously the meeting, and it's been really interesting, and I'm sure generated a tremendous amount of interest in your work. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but you'll be bound to have other things to do. But if you wish to stay, you're more than welcome. So thank you very much.
I'll drop off, but it's really nice to meet you. Thank you so much, and very best.
All the best to you. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Right, excellent. So we can move on. Thank you very much. It was a really interesting discussion. To try and get my agenda back up again. It's refusing. I think we're on evidence and insight, are we not? Catherine?
Hello. Yes, thank you. So yeah, in terms of evidence and insight then, so as you can see in the report pack, we've provided an update on what has been delivered within the quarter, what's planned for delivery, and obviously an overview of the risks that we've got and some assurance as well. So overall, the status for this one is on track. It's green, but in terms of some of the activities that have been undertaken since our last meeting in December, so colleagues have been engaging with the Shaping Places for Wellbeing in Wales programme through the 3 established learning groups that are there. They've been working on some systems maps. So they've been looking at neighbourhood wellbeing, a system to support an inclusive approach to healthy travel, climate and nature emergency, a system to increase skills for a green transition within public sector organisations, as well as poverty and inequality, looking at the systems that we have to increase participation in fair work within the public sector organisations. The PSB have been asked to consider how the learning from those systems can help support our own wellbeing plan. So there is an opportunity to share and embed that applied systems thinking and the skills that have been acquired by that group to the work that we are doing here as well, which has been, I think, greatly enjoyed by those that have participated in it. I think it was led by Public Health Wales. Initial discussions have identified that the climate action plan is a suitable work stream for applying some of the approaches there in such things such as procurement and food. Some colleagues also attended an advisory board workshop to look at the barriers and the actions for improving the impact of PSBs and the partnerships that we've got, and to maximise really our, what the tools that we've got and the people that we've got, as we know they can be often quite limited at times. The Powys Community Safety Partnership as well has been engaged, and we're going to establish a reporting link, as I think suggested in the last meeting, between officers there and the PSB as a whole, so that we understand the insight and the delivery that they are doing as well. Obviously, it's 10 years since the Future Generations Act came into being. So many colleagues attended an online event called Light Up the Future, celebrating 10 years of the Act. And they looked at a future design technique based on the concept of I can't even say the word, futurability, to inform current decision making and policy making. I think those that did attend that one had some very good feedback. It was based on some Japanese learning. In terms of engagement, the partnership colleagues have been collaborating closely with the regional partnership board engagement team to look at the structure and content of an online hub, which they've been working on. And this would ensure that we've got a digital presence for hosting the information that we have and any documents that they've started to work on jointly around citizen stakeholder involvement. We've also, as you know, launched the 6-monthly engagement and insight report that has been pulled together. That came to you in the autumn, and so it's just a plea really, if anybody does have the engagement and activities that you've been undertaking between October last year and now, please can you let us know to ensure that they are included in that report. The session with step leads also looked at the progress that we've made against the wellbeing plan and identified any areas of crossover between the work streams that we've got and some other things that are happening across the piece, such as sustainable and healthy foods and procurement as well. Data-wise, we've just completed the midpoint review of the population needs assessment, and we are currently looking at the data around that one and looking at which areas had had any significant change. We've also got a forward work programme that's being reviewed by the work stream leads to look at any gaps that we've got alongside partners as well, because as you know, our next wellbeing assessment, and population needs assessment will be published in March 27, so work would be commencing a lot more earlier than that one. So that's come around quite quickly. So that's being undertaken. Future activities, carrying on with that data trawl to make sure that what we do have is as useful as it can be. As you know, we've got our wellbeing information bank with some information on, but not all. Other things, as you know, the risks we've had throughout the year, there obviously is the risk around funding. It isn't funded, it's just reliant on people that currently work for our organisation. So that's a risk that we're managing, as well as data sharing agreements, making sure that we do have those in place so that when we do come to looking at data for the population needs and wellbeing assessments, we can have that easily and in a good form. Another one, I suppose, just to make you aware of it around assurance, is that the PSB Scrutiny Committee did undertake a development session not so long ago, and we showed them the wellbeing information bank that we do have and how useful that was, as well as much of the data that we do use. And that was a really good session, and they did thoroughly enjoy it, and they were going to go away and promote that bank to those in their areas. So I think that's it, unless anyone has any specific questions. I think you're on mute, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, Emma does. Emma.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Catherine, for the update. Just a few questions, not really necessarily for yourself, but things for the wider workstream leads to consider. I very much see the insight and engagement as an enabler and in support of the other work streams. I know that was the intention of setting up, but I think one of the things that we've got to ensure that this work stream assists us with, and in respect of those other objectives that we're delivering, is the impact. So we've set out an objective, we've set out a number of actions that we need to undertake, but what we need to have greater oversight of here is the impact of our efforts. So I'm wondering whether that is already coming through in terms of some of the data and some of the analysis that we're undertaking. I'd also be interested about how the others have reviewed the objectives on the basis of a mid-year population assessment or wellbeing and population assessment, to see whether that has informed different actions that need to be undertaken. And then the element for me in terms of engagement is around about how we forward plan together rather than the backward looking element. So in respect of engagement from that we need to undertake over the next 6, 12, maybe 18 months, what are the plans around that and how can we effectively do that together? It's always a challenge in terms of engagement and to get the contributions that we need from wider society. We know that's a challenge in itself, so there's certainly no criticism of anyone, but I think we need to be clear on that programme across across the board. Thank you.
No, thank you, Emma. Some good points. Does anybody else wish to either ask about the paper or Catherine's presentation, or indeed the points that Emma's been making? No, nobody. Catherine, is there anything you wish to add?
No, I'm just making some notes there to take away and make sure that we can feed that back in at the next meeting.
Lovely, thank you. Okay. Right, thank you very much. We can move on to the next item, if that's okay, to the climate emergency. Who's taking us through this?
Hello, everyone. So you have me, Liz Hutchins. I'm leading the climate step, but also with us from Banabra Ceiniog, we've got Simon here, who spoke earlier, Malusi Moyo, who's the climate officer who's been working on the project, and Toby Pitts, who many of you may not have come across before, and he's a project manager who's been working in the last quarter on this project. I'm going to share my screen, but whilst I do so, invite you to look at the updated board paper that was circulated yesterday. So I've got some slides just to walk you through the work that we've been doing to date. We're really at a turning point, looking ahead to the next phase of work, and what we want to do is share the insights that we've had from the last phase of work and some headlines about what we're anticipating doing in the next stage, and to get your sort of feedback on that and your guidance about what you think the priorities should be. So I wanted to start by just really emphasising the scope of the work that we've been doing. The approach we've been taking is a whole of Powys scope. So it's not just looking about climate in relation to public bodies, and it's not just Banabra Ceiniog. We happen to be the secretariat for the PSB climate work, but we've been focusing on the whole of the geographical spread of Powys and also kind of across society. I'm going to hand you over to Malusi now, just to talk through the work that we've done so far, and then we'll move on to what we're proposing to do moving forward.
Diolch, Liz. Yes, so I was just going to give you all a quick walkthrough on the work that we've completed in the first phase of work. So we've done some kind of research and analysis around the carbon footprint and climate risks to Powys, which I'll go through in a little bit, as well as some feasibility studies exploring what are the key kind of actions and interventions which are needed in key sectors and areas. And alongside some convening work with the Powys Public Service Board Climate Working Group, and then some stakeholder engagement events with the town and community councils, as well as PACE, Powys Action on Climate Emergency. Alongside of that, we've also collected some kind of case studies on what is best practice across Powys to highlight some of the good work which is being undertaken around carbon mitigation, but also kind of climate adaptation and resilience across sectors, including kind of public, private, and third sector organisations. Next slide, please, Liz. So the first bit is just a highlight on some of the work around understanding climate risk, and we've done a climate risk assessment to understand what are the key threats and vulnerabilities to people, but also nature across the county of Powys. Within the risk assessment, there are kind of 5 sections that we've outlined. The first is kind of exploring how climate change is already affecting Powys, with a spotlight on kind of key climate events which have happened recently, such as storms, heat waves, and the impacts those have had on different sectors and industries like agriculture, but also people, health, and well-being. We've also collected some data around the projections for a changing climate in Powys, looking at what that will mean for the region in terms of a 2-degree, but also 4-degree temperature warming rise across the region. And then alongside of that, we've overlaid those projections with some kind of spatial mapping to understand how will those risks play out within different towns and settlements across the region spatially, particularly looking at kind of the impact that heat waves, flooding, drought, but also storms may have as they manifest into the future. Then the 4th section is around kind of what are the anticipated climate risks to Powys. So what are the key kind of vulnerabilities to kind of systems, infrastructure, health and well-being, nature, but also economy, businesses and supply chains towards the region, and what are the vulnerable locations, assets, but also kind of species within those 4 categories that may see climate shocks and impacts manifest. And then our last section around kind of the next step. So from the research analysis, what needs to be done around delivering adaptation actions, but also building adaptive capacity so that organisations have this on their radar to kind of deal with moving forward. Next slide, please, Liz. The other element of the research is then around Powys's carbon footprint. And so we've done a carbon footprint analysis, as Liz said, for the whole county of Powys. This slide gives a highlight on what are the key emitting sectors within the region. You see land, rivers and nature is the highest one there, followed by mobility and transportation, goods and services, and then buildings, food, and electricity. Alongside of this, we've also done a carbon footprint segregated by kind of residents and visitors footprint, which highlights that 52% of the footprint is from residents and then a further 9% from visitors. Then the last final kind of 39% is then footprint around kind of industry, energy and land use, which isn't segregated around residents or visitors footprint. Next slide, please, Liz. And then from that kind of carbon footprint analysis, then we have a fair share decarbonisation trajectory. So this sets out the kind of high emitting areas and sectors that I outlined in the previous slide, but then looking at what is the sequestration opportunity across the region to then increase the amount of carbon we kind of capture and store from the atmosphere from things like kind of trees, soils and peatland across the region. So the y-axis gives an outline of how we can reduce the emissions across the region, and then the kind of lighter shade of green below that looks at how we can then increase the opportunities to increase sequestration across the region to kind of capture and store carbon, which sets out a glide path for Powys to reach net zero by kind of 2050 moving forward into the future. Next slide, please. Alongside all of that kind of piece of work, we've also done a set of kind of 5 feasibility studies exploring what the key actions and interventions needed in kind of 5 key sectors and areas to kind of scale action moving forward, including one around kind of sustainable food markets, effective climate governance, energy efficiency barriers and retrofit, but also community and shared transportation barriers, with one particularly around young people engagement, which has been around exploring kind of food system shifts using intergenerational time travel to get people to come together in conversations and dialogues between growers, but also young people to explore what does a sustainable shift look like within our food system, and then also bring those ideas to kind of decision makers within the region to consider moving forward into their policies. So that's just a quick walkthrough into kind of some of the work, and I'm happy to give any follow-ups to people who would like further information on some of the insights that we've gained from the first phase of work. Back over to you, Liz, now.
Thanks, Mel. So from this, we have 10 key findings, which are drawn from all of the research and analysis using the kind of some of them specialist consultants. Some of it's about workshops that we've had with different stakeholders and communities. So from this, you know, it's not a surprise to say that Powys really does face some very severe direct climate threats that we're already seeing, and projections for those ramping up. And it's something that needs to be, you know, very high on all of our agendas. But in addition to that, we face climate shocks, which are the kind of secondary impacts from what's going on around the world, particularly to our food system. And I think there's a real need to look at the change in the food production and consumption in the county, not just from the point of view of what happens here, but from the point of view of the impact of climate change and the global systems internationally. We've looked at, in terms of the carbon footprint, the absolute top line headline is that we're seeing the sorts of emissions that you would expect from a rural area and from a high income country, and there aren't standout features in relation to particular behaviours or population patterns that are distinct. And from that, I think that we can really draw that we have the opportunity to be exemplars for Welsh transition here. What does a really good just transition to net zero look like in relation to a rural part of Wales? So we can both be leadership, but also we can be fast followers on some of the solutions. We've identified 8 transformational shifts that are needed to get Powys to be net zero and climate resilient, and I'll come on to those in a minute. Another finding is that there really is a lot of work going on across the county, and that's very significantly in the public sector, but also in the third sector and some in the private sector. But it's probably insufficiently coordinated and certainly not visible enough to have the full impact that it could have. And so there are steps that can be done there to make sure that the good work that is happening is known about, and that people who are taking similar steps can understand what each other are doing and can learn from them. And there's an opportunity for the potential for a lot more partnership working. So the fifth finding is we looked into how organisations and parts of the world are focusing their climate work to have most impact. And there's a lot of learning that shows that taking a mission-led approach can provide long-term direction and purpose, and it can also help galvanise people for the long term when there are bumps in the road and challenges. It can help people in dispersed work streams understand how they're contributing to the whole, and it can help in raising and levering in money to the situation if there's a clear goal. I'll come on to say what the goal should be. So I think another finding is that we really do need more focus on the food system transition and climate resilience in particular. The 8 shifts, all of them are important, but those are standout areas where there is a need for more focus. Seventh finding is around community renewables and energy efficiency, and this is a standout opportunity to support wellbeing in Powys, with the potential for economic savings from those, and for that to be ploughed into the well-being of people, financially, but also health benefits and social benefits. And that's something that really we've got the potential to scale up in Powys. Eighthly is around the importance of community and youth engagement and involvement, and I think there's a real potential if we do this working with the learnings from the evidence and insight steps to really scale up how we involve people in defining the services and projects that need to happen in order that they meet people's needs. There's the ninth finding was around public sector coordination, that we are starting to do more of that, and there are discussions that are live around procurement and office space and all of that sort of thing. But I think there is the potential for further impact and efficiency if we're working out how our organisations can better align in this shift to be net zero and climate resilient. And I think if we work together in a more coordinated way, it will unlock and make more possible cross-sectoral partnerships with the businesses and third sector as well. And then lastly, none of us are surprised to know that more investment is required to achieve all of this. And the evidence remains really clear that there are huge investment needs for the public sector in terms of the upfront costs to transform our operations and our assets and our buildings, and that a lot of value can be added by organisations, public sector organisations, engaging with that wider society-wide shift, not least because the ability to tap into wider sources of funding is more in the society-wide space than it is in just decarbonising our own emissions. Although I think we all remain committed to maximising our work towards reaching net zero as public sector organisations. So the mission that we're proposing is a net zero climate resilient Powys. We could put a number on that, like we could say that we should be net zero by 2045, which is what our glide path shows. I think there is not necessarily an appetite for getting tied up in figures right now that might be different from the kind of Welsh government net zero figure. The evidence shows we could go a bit faster. I think the focus should be on getting there as soon as we can, and so that's what we're proposing at the moment, and happy to have a conversation about that. Clearly, it's harder to define an endpoint on resilience than it is on net zero. These are the 8 transformational shifts, and I won't read through them, and they're in your paper with a description against each one of them, and they're drawn out of all of the analysis that we've done about the kind of systems changes that are needed and the cross society changes that are needed in order to get to a net zero climate resilient future. Just give you a moment just to scan your eyes down that without reading all of them through. And part of the work that we did about understanding climate governance and responsibility was unpacking where responsibility lies for some of these things, and reflected in the sort of earlier finding there really is a huge amount of work going on across at regional level with our public bodies and more widely across society. So the question then is posed for this meeting is, how can the PSB add most value moving forward? We've done this data and analysis phase, and we've had a huge amount of involvement in producing that analysis. But what should we do next? This is where our thinking is at, and we wanted to reflect that to you and hear what you think our priorities should be and how we can contribute. And I'll go on to say what the actions would be if this was our role. So we think there is a continued role on evidence and analysis, and that's using the insights that we've got already and sharing them with across Powys so that more people have access to it and understand what the data and analysis shows. But there will be an ongoing need, and I think building on what Catherine was saying earlier, that we want to be working really tightly with the evidence and insight strand of steps, so that these aren't things in parallel, that we're building in the evidence and analysis of the climate work into the other things that we're doing. We think we can have a role in this public body collaboration, identifying pieces of the jigsaw where by particular partnerships of public bodies working together we can increase our impact and efficiency. We think there is a role for kind of articulating a mission, and for that giving a sense of direction and unity for people working across hugely disparate areas of work. So very much not command and control. We're not proposing a kind of hub and spoke approach where we're directing things. More it's a sense of how does having a role in helping to articulate how all of these different parts become a whole and become contributing factors to achieving the mission. We think we can have a role in connecting across Powys, and I'll come on to say about the Have Your Say Powys website proposal. But we think there's a huge potential for learning and collaborating. There are already really quite strong sectoral support networks out there. So, for example, on community renewable energy or something, and we wouldn't be seeking to replicate in any way that. It's more about signposting people to relevant information, but helping different communities across Powys to learn from each other and to be able to have visibility and see what learning, so that those that have solved problems in one area can learn from those in other areas, and to be honest, helping the public sector connect better and understanding what each of us are doing. It's I've been doing this for more than a year now, and I'm still finding things every day about what different parts of the public sector are doing that I wasn't aware of, and so using an online platform will help us to achieve that. I think there's a real need for giving voice to people in shaping the future, and so the youth project that we talked about that Malusi mentioned earlier, which is an example of the future ability that Catherine talked about, that using this idea of engaging young people in ways that they find kind of interesting and experiential is a way of helping people to be part of the conversation about the future. There's this issue about a coherent message. Everybody has looking at a elephant, kind of is just seeing different parts of it. How do we help to paint the picture of the whole? And that can help build confidence and trust. There's a real issue around the need to scale up uptake of existing projects. So if you think about government funded grants availability, how do we make sure that more people know about them, but also things like new upstart community transport. The viability of it rests on people using it, and there's something that perhaps we can do to help with that. And then lastly is around community support for community initiatives and unlocking action. So this is a very complex space, and sometimes just a conversation that is about identifying problems and barriers and how they can be overcome, and putting people in touch with the right decision maker to get something moved is something that we potentially could play a role in, and are well placed to do, building on the last piece of work. So
Liz, sorry to interrupt. That might be an opportune moment to take questions. That slide, previous slide, or would you rather go to the end and then?
Could I just very quickly finish, because I think the two link together, but very happy to answer questions. So just to say, what we've set out in the paper is some activities that we think could deliver on some of that role, the outputs that would be achieved, what would happen as a result, but very much this isn't about short-term landing the kind of short-term carbon saving or whatever. It's about contributing to those 8 transformational shifts, and I won't read these out, and they're in the paper, but these are the kind of, this is the list of things that we think that we could do, funded by SPF funding for the next period of time. It's the next 8 months, probably from May to the end of the calendar year. This is a really ambitious programme of activity that we're offering to pull together if the board thinks this is a useful direction. And I will stop there.
No, many thanks. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you short. I just thought that particular slide was really one we might want to look at. Diane has got a hand up. Diane, you're on mute. You can't get off mute. Oh dear.
There we are. I am off mute now. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation and kind of describing where we've been and setting out where we're trying to get to. I think you know some of my questions anyway, Liz, because we've kind of met beforehand. But just for the kind of visibility of the board as well, we were just discussing, weren't we? Kind of, you've given a very high level list of the things you've done and what that analysis tells us, but I think getting underneath some of that information that you've gathered and learned would be quite meaningful for a lot of public sector bodies here. So that you're very time limited, aren't you, today, in trying to propose those? And I know you've had trying to get into different ways to get that message across about what you've learned, but I think maybe an offer of just having a session for those that want to attend, looking a bit deeper on some of those findings, I think might be useful, because I think from the one-liners it's quite hard to make the connection between what you've learned and what your steps are. So I think that there might be more clarity there if we could have a bit of an in-depth session, if possible. And then in some of your what you're going to deliver and the outcomes we're going to make, I think we were talking about, it's hard to say, isn't it, by some of the activities when you engage and all the things you do to actually justify some of the outcomes that you've put there. And we were talking about the indirect and direct outcomes. So indirect is, yes, you are going to hold some sessions and you are going to reach a whole load of people, but can you directly say that the outcomes are going to be affected? Or possibly in some way, but it'll be very indirect. So it's just having that clarity, isn't it, around what is it that we're doing? What do we actually expect as a direct output and outcome, and what are the longer term benefits as well that we can see that might come through as in indirect outcomes? So I think just that clarity would be a bit better. Otherwise we'll be expecting you to say that how many flood properties have you stopped being flooded, and there's not going to be that direct correlation. So I think just a bit of clarity on that would be good.
Liz, did you want to respond?
Yes, in the updated paper, I did try to kind of set that out. The idea that there will be sequential impact there, and in 8 months we definitely can't commit to some of those specific outcomes in relation to flood protection and carbon saved and so on. What we can commit to is reaching a number of people with the aim of doing things like driving up uptake in schemes and helping the public sector to understand what the public need is. And the reason we've chosen to approach it with the kind of 13 localities is that we hope that will get to the level of granularity that would actually be useful, because there's a lot what we've done so far in terms of, for example, understanding climate risk is a kind of cross-Powys approach with some insights from different communities and sectors. And we think that the need is to go down much deeper. And it's a convening role, though. So, many of our organisations are involved in this already. So it's about making sure that the needs of communities are connected with the different sort of stakeholders and parts of the public sector that need to be involved in that.
Okay, thank you. Emma?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. I've written down questions, Liz, as you're working through in terms of my own thinking around, what do we know now that we didn't know? Where do we focus our most effort? And we hear the terms, to get our greatest bang for our buck, so to speak. But noting the points that Diana's just made in terms of the direct and indirect elements, I think that is a challenge and something we need to work through. And how do we ensure that we don't duplicate? Because there is a lot of work undertaken across the respective organisations. And I also think from a wider societal element, the challenge, I think on a day-to-day basis for people and significant challenges for them is the cost of living versus trying to live within balance of the planet. And I think there's a real tension there at the moment, and I don't think that helps actually, because ultimately when you may be struggling to put food on the table versus doing the right thing by the planet. I think that's a real challenge for people in their everyday life. So I'm thinking, what is our role here and as community leaders, and how do we take this forward? And I think our biggest role is in terms of influence and in terms of wider society. And I'll use an example, because I think it's wider influence in terms of our younger population and in schools. So it's going back a few years, but when I was in school, I remember us doing, the first elements around recycling. It was the new thing. When I look at my own children now, who are grown up, they don't actually know life before recycling, because recycling became the new norm, and from their perspective, that's how that works and goes forward. So I'm just thinking from a climate perspective, because we can't stop the floods immediately, although we recognise the costs of those to the planet and also to individuals and their homes or their businesses and the infrastructure, etc. How can we have a greater influence on our younger population that will bring around generational change for the climate, rather than necessarily grappling with the here and now? I don't know that you've got the answer for that, but those are the questions that are in my mind in terms of thinking about how we can have that greater influence. Because the reality is, and I think there's an important part on your slide around the financial element, I know from a local authority alone, unless we're going to put in £126 million year on year, we can't meet net zero in the way that we originally thought, and we haven't got those funds, so we need to think differently. Thank you.
Liz, do you want to come back?
Yeah, can I come back on that one?
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point, and it's raised a lot. I think what we have to be really clear about is that this is not an environmental or climate issue. This is a social economic crisis, and the climate and nature emergency is going to massively affect our economics and our communities. So those communities that are already struggling, the ones that who are already choosing between food and fuel, we know that we're heading towards a food crisis. We know that costs of energy are going up. So the people that are already struggling are the most struggling. And I had a really interesting conversation with the Future Generations Commissioner last week about this. And he said what he would say is to that point is that we know that those are already the most disadvantaged people. But equally, this problem's getting worse and worse and worse. So we're never going to solve the poverty crisis. It's not going away. It's getting worse. And we know it's going to get worse. And we know that the environmental crisis is going to accelerate that. So the preventative principle in terms of taking money from our budgets to put into that is absolutely critical. And we have a social justice and an equality duty to really do that, because we have the evidence and knowledge that this is only going to get worse for those people. So I completely understand that, we've got an immediate crisis, but that is not going away. So I think the argument has to be that we need to find a way to say we take a proportion of budget and we take a proportion of activities to really, really invest in these solutions, because the solutions that are coming out, to take your point, Emma, about the sort of the most focus, the most effort. So one of the things that's come up is around energy efficiency, for example, and retrofit. That will create jobs. That will create training. It will create industry for the county. It will also tackle fuel poverty and reduce people's ill health due to cold homes, wet homes, damp homes, and overheating. So, there are certain things that we're drawing out from this evidence where we can put significant money in that will develop those supply chains, that will support the local economy. And I think we have a sort of a duty really to do that, because we do know that those people who are already in crisis will be the people that will suffer the most.
Can I come back, Chair? Thank you very much. I think the important thing around the skills then is how you're linking in with the regional skills partnership, that then also informs the curriculum and the development in those aspects, because those things are just not going to come, are they, in terms of, so I understand the wider economic development, but also from a national policy, we need to be, there's just that realism at the moment in terms of the difference between providing the services that we absolutely have to now, and let's be clear, safeguarding education, social services from a local authority perspective will always be the top priority, but finding that mechanism and to work and to develop those skills that you're referring to would be really good to draw on the regional skills partnership, that impact in terms of the business and the economic development infrastructure, and also the curriculum in schools. So we come back to the same point in terms of those young people. So it'd be good to, if we can make those join up, that would be great.
Absolutely. And one of the things we've included in there is the hackathons. And I think one of those around energy efficiency and the retrofit market could be really interesting, because, as you quite rightly said, there's a huge issue in the supply chains, the joining up with education, the joining up with the installers, and, bringing the private sector in who want to invest in this but don't have a mechanism to at the moment. If we can do that, that will really shift that dial that you're talking about, and we've done it piecemeal over the years. I've been involved with like apprenticeship schemes and all those sorts of things, but it does need a sort of transformational economic shift, and if we can bring everyone together to do that, then absolutely, I think that's really, potentially really exciting for everyone.
Thank you. Mez.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, Liz, really, for the presentation and sharing the paper. So in terms of, obviously, each organisation has got sort of fibre and carbon, etc., and looking at actions that we can take. And your point's really about how that is joined up across the public sector organisations in sort of Powys, and you mentioned about visibility of some of the good works going on as well, and how we give spotlight to that. So I think, not to solve here today, but it'd be good to hear a bit more how we can actually do that sort of collectively, would be helpful. I agree with Emma's point around young people. I do think in terms of schools, children, young people, they are much more aware of our planet, sustainability, and changes around the healthy schools, eco, etc. And I also note in your paper that you talked about public sector behavioural change campaign element, and then also about community climate engagement events. I just wonder whether we should probably explore a bit more about, is it a public sector behaviour change campaign in terms of employees, or is it around engaging within those communities to look at what the small things everybody can do on a daily basis to change. How do we get that engagement but turn it into action, if that makes sense, really? And top tips around the community, and whether we involve young people to tell us actually what are the things they see on a daily basis that perhaps we do that we can sort of change. And then secondly, then, in terms of planning the big decisions that public organisations do, we do have impact assessments, health impact assessment, environmental impact assessments, etc. And we talked about planning earlier on, really, and I think scrutinising those decisions element around the Future Generations Act, the decisions we're making today, actually what impact that has for future generations. And are we making those decisions with that in mind as well? Thank you.
Thank you. Leslie, do you want to comment on that, or you're on mute?
So, Gavin, perhaps I'll hear what Gavin's got to say and then come back.
Yeah, come back. Okay, Gavin.
Thanks. Yeah, and it's timely with low river levels, wildfires, still picking up the pieces from winter storms. I think we've gone up the sort of seasons of these issues to it being a year-round thing. And clearly there's a lot of work that's been done through this to pull together different sort of strands of information to inform a range of potential interventions. It helps to map out in terms of what's already being covered and helps us to sort of further do that gap analysis, and what we can potentially do to sort of inform and adjust some of the things that we're already doing to cover some of those gaps. So I think, as has been mentioned, I think our focus has got to be in where there's that greatest additionality to what's already being done, and really for that subgroup to help to agree the next steps about how we really narrow down into those specific things where we can only or best achieve through the PSB, because there is an awful lot. There's clearly the demand and need is huge. And there's an awful lot of stuff that is already being done, but I think it's about how we really sort of hone in on those things that are best or only achieved through the PSB, which we've got that sort of broader menu that's been developed. It's how we now sort of narrow that down.
Yeah, right. Ewan, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think I'm just following on really from that point that Emma makes around influence. I'm just trying to layer that into our world in the fire sector. And I think we look at fires in people's homes and the reduction in those numbers over the last 2-3 decades have been really, really significant. I think a lot of it is about selling and marketing the alternative, and that's happened through societal change for us from a number of angles, really. When you think about open fires for heating, central heating comes along, old wiring with fuses, the RCD current breakers, circuit breakers come along, smoking to healthier lifestyle, materials used in furniture, etc. But convincing the public that the alternative is a better option than the current route, and that's always the challenge. And I think sort of politics coming out from America at this moment in time don't help that in terms of that influencing approach to the. But I think a lot of it is about the alternative being a better option.
Yeah, it's a really good point, isn't it? And also, I suppose the persuading people that action in our communities, which mostly are small, scattered, how much difference is that going to actually make to addressing the challenges that climate and nature emergencies are presenting? And when people go from places like Powys and they go to big cities like London or Birmingham and see the volume of carbon emissions that are being made there every second on their road systems and from these huge urban areas, you can understand why people say, well, why should we bother? What difference is it going to make when there are people still piling into London on 8-lane highways in fossil fuel driven vehicles? And all the incentives for having electric vehicles are being one by one have been removed, basically. So This is the challenge, isn't it? It's the influence issue, isn't it? It's the influencing public opinion, influencing people's behaviour. So, Liz, you've listed a sort of number of actions that you're suggesting the PSB should endorse. Would it be worth putting that slide up again for us to look at it, perhaps?
Yep, happy to do that. Just gonna there now.
And then we need to decide what we're going to do.
So we have the opportunity to make the case for £100,000 worth of SPF funding between May and December. That's quite a tight turnaround for doing activity, but we do have a team ready and waiting to do the work. What we've been doing some, or Toby in particular has been doing some project management mapping about, you know, what could we fit into that amount of money and realistically deliver. The ones in bold are the kind of what we feel we can fit into £100,000. What we're saying is that we would need further funding to bring in an extra staff member to do any of the following ones. Just to kind of give a bit more of the rationale. So the idea about kind of so a step back, actually. So the Welsh Government climate communication strategy focuses in on the audience segmentation of people who are most willing to take action and the people who could be convinced to take action. And we're just not going to focus in on the kind of climate deniers for now. And they say that we could be most effective with communicating kind of social proofing. So showing that people like me do activities like this. Showing that it's happening, so showing that in your area lots of things are going on, and trying to build in part of that is public sector confidence, confidence that the public sector is doing its part. And so in order to get behaviour change, you need to connect those to people knowing how to take action and what is available to them. And so that's why we're proposing to combine these, the kind of an online Powys Climate Hub on the Have Your Say website, where it can kind of be a one-stop shop to understand and tell the story of what's going on with case studies and but a kind of an interactive way, so that we as a public sector can kind of help collectively build the picture of what we're all doing. So we've got a lot of insight into it after this more than a year's work, but it's live and it's moving, and we need to have a, you know, building on the first conversation about using data and digital platforms, we need to do this in a more sophisticated way so that it all comes together in a coherent place and people can see what is the sum of the parts going on in Powys and how do they connect to each other. Linked to that, we're proposing these 13 community climate engagement events, you know, potentially like whole day into the evening, engaging different parts of society, different themes, in order to do this wraparound piece of work around amplifying the projects and initiatives that are going on, so more people know about them, they understand the rationale for them, they know why if you take a certain action it's going to make a real difference. So it's that kind of communications piece, but it's also about hearing from people what are the everyday issues that are affecting them. And back to Emma's point, I think this end of the planet, end of the week issue, it is real, and a lot of the climate solutions are not ones that are going to benefit people absolutely immediately, and they have upfront costs that people cannot afford. Some of them are, though, you know, and so some of the things are win-wins, and we need to make sure that we've got the ability to navigate those within communities and to help people to voice what their needs are, and that those needs are fed into, you know, all of our service provision and all of our sort of prioritization. So we'd envisage taking those conversations and feeding them up the food chain, you know, up to the, you know, the senior leadership of these organisations through appropriate channels and through different areas of work. And, you know, things like it was mentioned, the regional skills partnership. So we've worked with them, no interest in replicating what they're doing, but if we can make sure that everywhere we go on a bit of a road show, people understand what the opportunities are. But more than that, there's a challenge of you know, if there is, you know, if the college puts on a training course for builders to get trained up in retrofit, they're not necessarily not great uptake at the moment because people have got their books filled and they don't see the kind of social imperative to do it. And if we can kind of be a contributing factor to kind of this kind of shift in society that says this is an important mission, you know, this is something that we've all got a role in contributing to, but helping to people to understand you know, how they can. That's sort of some of the thinking behind that. There are some things that we've been asked to continue to support and take on. So Town and Community Council's got an incredibly important role in this response. There is a need for ongoing support for them. Some amazing people, you know, doing a lot of work in their communities. That needs to be joined up and coordinated. PACE has been playing that role. Their funding is coming to an end. So there's a need to support that. Sorry, I risk kind of just going through it, but that's just to give you a bit of an insight into some of the rationale about how our insights from what the challenges and character of the situation is in Powys, like what is the added value that the PSB can provide here. And it's somewhat of a wraparound and a kind of amplification role at heart, but it's also this kind of coordinating role as well. I can't see people because I'm showing my screen, but if people want to jump
so we've got two questions, Liz, one from Emma and then one from Carl.
Yeah. Thank you. So Chair, I'm actually, you know, coming back to my point of influence earlier and the helpful contribution from you, and in particular around the alternative and the better options. I think the majority of this bold list actually would enable us to do that influence on the external, the wider societal elements, behaviour, but also the support. So from my perspective, from local authority, I think we could support that. Clearly it's up to yourself, but then what that would allow us to do from a local authority perspective, we could focus on our internal elements. So and the reasons we've got around that, we can do that component, and then obviously we've got some work that we're undertaking in a separate partnership around our environmental platform that we would continue to pursue. So I think this could be an added value addition rather than duplication, and it would allow, as I said, the partnership to focus on the wider societal behaviours, influence, information, understanding, and allow us then to focus on more of the internal aspects. So I think it's something we would like to support.
Yeah, I agree entirely. Carl.
Yeah, thanks. I certainly haven't received any specific briefing or mandate, as it were, in relation to this prior to the meeting. I don't know who from the Health Board has been involved in the officer group that's been leading this. It'd be interesting to know who they are, so that you know, that they can give a steer. Mez may want to come in. She may well know stuff that I don't. I suppose what I'm actually saying, James, is that without Hayley here, it would be difficult for me on behalf of the Health Board to give a green light at this stage. We'd need to take it away and come back having had that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, and understood. I'm sure we all understand that. None of us are mandated really to make these decisions as such, but we're certainly mandated to take back to our respective organisations these suggestions and then give us a yay or nay accordingly. Mez.
Yeah, thank you. And Carla, I think Steve Burney is, involved in the working group, but just to support really with, you know, the proposal activities today, you know, we can take it back and perhaps come back in the next 3 or 4 weeks with a sort of response if that is acceptable for Liz.
Right. I mean, I think between so from Powys County Council's point of view, I think between Emma and myself as leader that we are mandated probably to agree to this sort of list of actions, and I'm certainly happy to support them. and if other organisations can get back to Liz and colleagues ASAP with their response, that would be really helpful. But it looks like a very sensible list of actions. What the SPF funding? Can somebody, Diane, you might be in the best position, and any others to comment on that. I mean, is that already committed, or is that still to be applied for, or what's the state of play?
Yeah, we haven't finalised the final plan to UK government yet, but we have put an indicative 100,000 aside for this PSB action. Yeah.
Fine. So in that sense, we're reasonably confident that that money can be used for this purpose. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Well, that's helpful. Claire, it's Wales. Claire, did you want to comment, or you're just happy to chat in the chat?
Yeah, sorry, I was happy to chat as I'm thinking. No, I just saying about the caution. I'm always cautious when it comes to online hubs because it takes a amount of resource to keep those up to date and the promotion of them. So I'm always cautious around that and keep the information live. And if this is all going to be funded through SPF until end of December, what's the longer term plan to maintain that? Because otherwise we're at risk of setting something up that isn't going to be continued. And the same as the help desk, really making sure that we're not duplicating what's already on offer, potentially from other avenues. And that was just me thinking as I was listening to the discussion, James.
No, a very sensible caution there. I don't know, is there an answer to what happens after December? I don't think anybody knows. That's the trouble.
So the proposal would be that the Climate Hub would be on the Have Your Say website. As I understand, there's a live discussion about the kind of level of servicing of that beyond this calendar year. So I think we would have to future-proof the content with the idea that it could be shared on a range of different platforms. There's the content, then there's the design, isn't there? And what we'd want to do is kind of seek to integrate this with other work that's going on, like the PAVO website and so on. The PACE website. So Powys Action on the Climate Emergency. So it is something that we're alive to, but we do think there's a need for it. It doesn't exist at the moment. There isn't somewhere that you can go to work out what is going on in Powys on climate change, and including across our organisations, we don't have the ability, the visibility to know what's going on. We can produce a static report, but that's not, it's not really in the nature of the situation. So we do think there's a need for an online facility. There are external services that can be procured. There's something called One Planet, which is and it's sort of an excellent hub type initiative, but these things come with quite big costs. So that's kind of a £10,000 a year service fee for that. And so we were hoping to build something on the Have Your Say website, which would have be hosted and integrated into what the public sector is trying to do in Powys anyway.
So Mike Grease has put something in the chat as well. Yeah, thank you, Mike. So it's helpful. Right. Okay. Claire's wondering, is there evidence for a need for an online hub? I can't answer that. I think, Liz, obviously you feel there is, otherwise you wouldn't have put it in the list. Mess, you're waiting.
Yeah, thank you. It's just Claire's helpful comment there. I'm just conscious that these are bullet point headlines, aren't they? And I think what would be probably helpful for all of us would be behind this, whether there's a summary in terms of what's the scope of the activity then, what's the resource implication, is it a one-off event, or is it, is there a sustainability issue? And that way then, as organisations, we're able to consider the headline bullet points in front of us in a bit more detail.
Yes, I think one of the things that I reflect on, so I did link in the paper, there's a link to a full work plan, and you're very welcome to look at that, and I'd be really happy to bring more detail to these meetings. I'm finding it a little bit hard to kind of pitch the level of detail that you want. I think there's also an issue about in between these board meetings, we have really good engagement for the PSB Climate Working Group. So yes, sort of Steve comes very regularly and is an active part from the Teaching Health Board. There's a question about how that working group is engaging with the rest of the organisation that each person represents, and the communication in between those meetings and the level of seniority of engagement on this issue. So clearly we have really good discussions here and we have really good discussions in the climate working group. I think there's something missing in between, because you can't, nobody can absorb the depth of information in the duration of a meeting like this and with one set of papers. So be really interested to hear if you do want to have more time on this. We're super happy to come back and present all the findings of the climate research that we've done so far. And in fact, at the last board paper that I presented, my question at the end of it was, how would you like to receive the information? And the response was that you did just want the summary of it. So if anyone's interested in an in-depth presentation, perhaps an hour-long presentation, we can get some of the, we can get some of the consultants in. We're really keen to share this with you, and we're really keen to have more of your input if you can help us to know how that can best be done.
Right, well, okay. So I think we need to try and wrap this up now because time is marching on. We don't want to wait for another 3 months to the next PSB meeting. So what I suggest is, I mean, there's still a senior officer group meet. Is that right, Emma? You're still meeting as?
No, we haven't come together as senior officers now for many months.
Right. Is this not an issue that perhaps could I request from the chair that you do to look at this list that Liz has produced and just between you with your delegated authority decide how best we can deliver on, if not all, at least some of it, because we don't want to ask Liz to come back in to the next PSB. We've only got 8 months of this funding to run, and if there's going to be things done, they need to be done quite quickly.
Yes, well, I think we've made our position. Yeah, we've made our position very clear in terms of support for the majority of the bold. And so what I would suggest is the other statutory partners that aren't in a position to do so, that their senior officers link with Liz to resolve the situation.
All right, Ewan?
I'm happy to support the chair today on behalf of Mid and West Wales Fire.
Okay, great. All right, so so who we got? We got the health board. If you could, I understand your position without the chief exec being present. It's difficult to commit. Carl, so if you could liaise with Liz, having had that discussion with Hayley and others as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Mez offered earlier to have the necessary discussions and, and to communicate on our behalf.
Lovely. Okay, Mez, thank you very much, both. So, and then Gavin, you're the other statutory partner, are you not? Yes.
Yeah, and I think our position is, with the caveat around avoiding duplication of existing activities, and that there's that sort of long-term thinking, recognizing that it's short-term funding, that that's adequately factored in, then we're similarly supportive.
Brilliant. Okay. That looks like a green light, Liz.
Yeah, how?
Leave it with you. All right. Okay, thanks, one and all. That's really good, a very good presentation, and thank you to all those involved in working it up and doing all the background work. And it's good to hear that the Climate and Nature Group is working well. That's really encouraging. Excellent. So, shall we move on to the last item on the agenda, which is healthy weights? Mez, is it you? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so colleagues Tracy and Anna have sort of joined me, who are both heavily involved in systems leading of this sort of work element. So there's a brief sort of paper in terms of update on the last quarter in the pack. So I'm just going to hand over now to colleagues, and I think we're going to try and show a bit of a video, but I'll let colleagues update. Oh, we're going, yeah, okay.
Yep.
All live?
Yes, all live.
Great, thanks. Okay, so just to update really on the last quarter, I know my colleagues, I wasn't here for the last meeting, but my colleagues did update on behalf of the whole system approach to healthy weight. So this is really focusing on the period of January to March, the last quarter. So just as a recap, we've got the overall system as children aged 0 to 5 years, families and access to healthy food, which we got through engagement work with stakeholders. And then following another set of stakeholder engagement events, we came up with 4 priority areas within that system. So the key areas that we're working on at the moment are breastfeeding, introduction to solid foods, cooking skills, and affordability of healthy food. Each of those 4 areas has a working group which carries out an action plan working towards the visions listed below, and they report into the strategic whole system approach to healthy weight group as well. So we've got an established governance structure where we've got all the actions coming through to that strategic group. So focusing on the first priority, breastfeeding. So the challenge, obviously, it might be mentioned before, is that although we seem to have a good initiation rate of breastfeeding in Powys, this does drop quite quickly, and especially after 6 months. Sometimes it can be as low as 35% after 6 months. So what we're trying to do through addressing breastfeeding is to support mothers to be able to continue to breastfeed in supportive environments for as long as they wish to. So we've been doing a lot of work around promoting the breastfeeding friendly scheme, and thanks to the other organisations that have helped us with that and joined us in pledging that all our public facing spaces will be breastfeeding welcome. At the last count, it's got 229 businesses had signed up, or organisations across Powys, so up over 100 from the last quarter. On the last check, it was more like 250, so it is something that's going up every day, the number of businesses that are signing up. We've been working on a promotional film, working with businesses, working with local mums and working with professionals to try and promote the breastfeeding welcome scheme a bit more on social media and trying to get people to come to us to sign up rather than having to go out to them. We've also done some work around policies, so staff induction training, manager training, and equality training. Breastfeeding welcome is embedded in all of those within the health board. And as a result of other organisations signing up to the breastfeeding welcome scheme, they've actually expressed an interest in looking at their workplace policies as well. So my colleague Fiona has been doing a lot of work around looking at policies. Within this area for the next year, we're looking to continue to roll out the scheme, focusing on areas that are in more deprived areas. We're doing a detailed comms plan to try and get the project rolling a bit more with less intervention from us, I suppose. And we're also looking at some insight work to be carried out with breastfeeding mums or mums who aren't breastfeeding to try and understand the barriers facilitators to breastfeeding and to feed that into the action plan and the working group so we can check that the action plan is meeting, I suppose, what the public are telling us. We're also still working on the review of the breastfeeding data, both locally and nationally. So this is ongoing work with separate groups outside of the whole system approach work. The next theme here is introduction to solid foods. So in the last quarter, we've been working on increasing parental knowledge and confidence, which was one of the barriers that came through one of the initial stakeholder engagement events. We've done some work with health visitors and nursery nurses to ensure they're properly trained by dietetic team to provide information and knowledge to parents and to help make sure that parents are getting the correct information around introducing solid foods to their children. We've also been working with early years settings and childcare settings through the Gold Standard Healthy Snack Award. So this has been working with our Healthy and Sustainable Preschool scheme. So the Healthy Snack Award is about making sure that children have access to healthy food within the nursery settings, but it's also about making sure that the nursery or childcare setting has appropriate policies, appropriate food hygiene practices, that they're promoting a healthy and happy eating environment. So it's actually a little bit more than just looking at healthy snacks. It's the whole approach to healthy eating within that setting. So for the next quarter then, or next year, we're looking at working with more preschool colleagues to understand some of the challenges they face in introducing healthy foods in those settings. And we're looking at getting more settings engaged in the Gold Standard Healthy Snack Award. And we're working with national colleagues on trying to pull through some of the data on weaning. We know the data is captured, but at the moment we can't access it. So we're just trying to bottom out why that is. On the next area, we've got cooking skills. My colleagues probably talked about the Cooking Counts programme that working with the Powys County Council, the Health Protection Team. We managed to secure some funding from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and we put that together to deliver cooking classes, which also had a focus on numeracy and literacy. There's a film that I'm going to show you next, which kind of talks about the impact of that. So I won't talk about that for too long. But going forward to next year and developing on this cooking skills theme, we're looking at coordination of the cookery skills classes that are going on across Powys. So that's in partnership with Boy Powys Food. And we're also trying to make sure that the cooking classes that are delivered are evidence-based and the nutrition information is correct, so that people have had training, for example, in Agorid Cymru Level 2 nutrition skills. We're also looking at trying to, with Boy Powys Food again, bring together sort of a website that holds a list of all the sort of cooking classes that are running across Powys, because it's actually quite a lot going on. It's just not done so in a very coordinated way at the moment. So I'll move on to the next slide, which is a video you may have seen it, you may not have, on cooking counts and the impact of that delivery in Powys. Start from the start, sorry. Not working. Sorry, is that not working?
Hi Anna, yeah, it's not working on my screen, but I don't know whether it is for others.
Okay.
Same as Anna, not working though.
Okay. Share window.
Something's happening now.
Yeah, we can see it now.
Great.
Hey, thanks, Anna.
Anna, there's no sound coming through.
Yeah, you'll have to enable sound when you share.
And just working out how to do that now.
I think if you stop sharing,
yeah,
and then when you go to click on share again,
it's
there
right
should
at the
be
top. Right
there
at
we
the
go.
top.
You're probably better placed, Catherine, to advise.
Top right, it says include sound.
Yeah,
Click that, then share the screen.
Sorry, thank you. Out of
I think it's
practice.
digital learning in action, isn't it? Linking our first presentation.
That's it.
I'm Vicky Morris and I'm Community Manager for Flying Start, and I cover the Llandrindod area. So my role is working with families who've got under fives and yeah, just sort of supporting them, accessing services and meeting people, making connections, learning about gaps in services and sort of trying to work with other agencies to try and fill those gaps for the families. Yeah, Yeah, the group in Llandrindod has been great. A couple of the families that I know really well have been on the group, which has been really nice, and I've been in regular contact with them throughout the course, which has been lovely. It's been lovely for them. They spoke really positively about it. I've even had a couple of pictures of one of the mums doing some of the cooking at home with her children, which has been really lovely. They made the pizza and the muffins, and they sent me some pictures of the little girl actually sort of like putting the puree on the pizza base, and it was just really lovely to see that there was an impact in the home environment as following attending the group. That's something that's really important to us, that we sort of, you know, in everything that we do, is that we engage the whole family, and the sort of sessions and groups become, you know, something for that whole family that the children can be included in. One of the really interesting things about this group is obviously there's a numeracy element, and I know that they've been sort of subtly sort of including that in the sessions and in the cooking sessions that they've been doing, sort of like the weighing and the counting, the measuring, all of those sort of like subtle sort of numeracy elements that have been, you know, really helpful, and the families have fed back that it's really positive, and in some ways they haven't even noticed it because it's just been included so well in the sessions, in what they've been doing, which has been really lovely.
Well, I mainly signed up because I was looking for some new ideas in the kitchen, something that's quick and easy to make. Try and increase like the sort of fruit and veg intake on a daily basis, and with a busy toddler as well. Try and get her into very good eating habits as well, so she's not just eating rubbish like crisps and biscuits and whatnot. So it's been a learning experience for myself and my daughter. I've also learnt techniques in the kitchen as well, you know, sort of knife safety and stuff like that, which then obviously my daughter can use her little children's knives, and we can do it as like a family activity as well as at home, and teach her basically about food and fruit and veg and the different types really. My numeracy before joining the course wasn't brilliant, I have to admit that. But over the several weeks that we've been doing this course, I've been learning how to count up on scales, been learning how to look at the different percentages on food labels and work out what's good and what's not. We've also looked at comparison between making homemade stuff compared to takeaways, and some of the results are quite shocking. Which I've been more cautious when I've been going to supermarkets, looking at the labelling of various ingredients and stuff. I'm doing sort of basic maths with some like little bit of more complicated stuff. So yeah, it's improved a little bit more, but obviously it's a learning curve, so obviously you can always bring more into it as well. So I've spent more time in the kitchen, preparing meals, trying some of the recipes out we've done in class between the weeks, and my daughter's been helping me with that as well when she's home from nursery. So yeah, been interested in like just having different dinners really, yeah, than from our usual stuff that we normally go to, which is usually the freezer. But yeah, fresh is best, as they say.
Okay, so I'll just go back to the presentation. But okay, So I think that gives you quite a nice insight into what some of the people got from going on the cooking skills sessions. And the good thing is that the staff there were fully trained in, like I mentioned before, the Agorid cooking courses, and we were able to buy resources that have been used in other cooking sessions as well. So those skills of the staff are there now for us to use to roll out to other cooking sessions that we might do in the future. The final priority theme is the affordability of healthy food. So what we've been doing around this one is continuing to maximise the Healthy Start uptake. And we've also done some insight work again and trying to understand the barriers and the difficulties that people face around accessing this healthy food and getting it at affordable prices. Going forward into the next quarter, we want to keep promoting the Healthy Start scheme. We're also working on a pilot with Boyd Powys Food, a local grower, and some Flying Start childcare settings, nursery settings again. So we're looking at using the Healthy Start card to be able to purchase healthy food from local growers and to get that into parents and to the nursery settings themselves. So we're in the process of putting in a funding bid for that at the moment. And then we'll be developing, if that funding is secured, we'll be developing an evaluation framework to monitor the impact of that pilot. So a brief update, I suppose, on what we've been doing over the last quarter. And just a slight reminder then that we are following this 9-step methodology that we've presented a few times, produced by Public Health Wales. So a lot of the work in 24-25 has been focused on action planning, step 7, and step 8, which is mobilise and manage. And I think going forward into 25-26, we'll be focusing on step 7 and step 8 as well, but we'll also be going back to step 4, which is system engagement. So we've had that real deep insight from stakeholders through our initial events across the last 2 years. Now we want to go out to the public. Now we've got our target groups and say, what do you think of these actions? Is what stakeholders are telling us the same as what you're experiencing? And we just want to marry that up with the action plans we've got and make sure that the actions that we're taking forward do reflect the insights and I guess what the public that are in Powys are facing at the moment. Okay, so I'll stop sharing the screen. And thank you.
No, thank you. Really interesting and some really good work going on there. Still, Diane.
I just wanted to say how innovative our partners and everybody has been in using multiply funding, I think, for that one. So the multiply funding was absolutely just directly linked at numeracy, and it was so hard to find projects that met the requirements. And I think this is just a really fantastic innovative use of that funding. So just wanted to say thank you, really.
You're absolutely right. It is, but it's so valuable and such a good output, for the amount of money that's spent. It's producing real benefit. Emma.
Yeah, I'd like firstly echo those comments and well done. But the other element, really interesting to see how the partnership with Boyd Food goes, and that moves forward in because of this also links with our wider agenda in terms of local food, etc. So it's just showing how all of this is starting to connect across the partnership. So and I know that the Future Generations Commissioner in particular is interested in this because Diane and I met with him in recent weeks and was very interested around the work, and then also making the links with the SAN project that we've got underway in terms of the horticulture and that development locally. So it's really exciting to see what's going to come of all this. So thank you very much.
Indeed. And of course, now with Flying Start potentially going to be rolled out much more widely across Wales. The aim is to make it available right across Wales from Welsh Government's perspective. Because of course, there's another great opportunity to expand this sort of work if we can find the funding. Are there any other comments? Yes, Mez.
Yeah, thank you. And sort of a film, doesn't it? I want to say video then, showing my age. A film coming brings it to life, isn't it, really? And I suppose for me, really, it's you know, it's good to reflect across partnerships, isn't it, really? Because we recognise that overweight and obesity sort of rates were going in the wrong direction, and through the partnership and workshops, sort of going back probably 2.5, 3 years now, coming together, homing in on that sort of early life, in early life, giving children the best start in life, really. And we have got metrics around there. And this is not necessarily about what individual organisation are doing, it's about collectively bringing together the organisations and having it as a priority. And there'll be some things that we bring back to our own organisations. Policies is an example of one of them, you know, making sure our nutrition standards are going through our weaning element. But some of the examples we've shown there around cooking camps, you know, that is a multi-organisational effort, seeing people come together and, you know, successfully bidding, but also delivering sort of across. And Powys, etc., is another example. So just wanted to say really about the benefits of the PSB is about that, what is the joint priority and what is it that we can lift above to join and look for those sort of opportunities with, you know, hardly any funding, if I have to, you know, say. And can you imagine if we did secure funding to put behind some of this, how faster we might be able to go as well. So just want to acknowledge and thank everybody sort of involved.
Yeah, it's a really, you're absolutely right, Miss. A really good example of what can be achieved through the PSB system. As you say, it's perhaps something we need to better publicise. I don't know how, but certainly need to disseminate in some form or another. Are there any other questions or comments? I'm sure we're all really very pleased with this outcome. I certainly am. No, I don't think there are. Okay, well, thank you very much. And thank you very much for the presentation and for the film, which was very good indeed. Excellent. The forward work programme is in item 6. Have I missed anything on the agenda? Sorry, just checking the agenda now. The dates of future meetings is in item 5, as outlined. July is the next one. And then the forward work programme. And then we do have a standing item, item 7, the sustainability updates. Is there anything any partner wishes to update? It looks like we've all managed to set our budgets, which is a sort of minor miracle, I think, but we have managed it, I think, with all of the stresses and strains that was involved. Is there any other issue that partner organisations would like to raise at this stage? I mean, we can go into private session if we have to, but I think probably we're okay for today. And no doubt this item will become a more pertinent issue as we get into the autumn and we start thinking about next year's finances. But at least at the moment, we're all still functioning and upright. Good. Okay. Well, my thanks to all those who've contributed today. Really interesting discussions, some quite meaty items, and a very worthwhile meeting in my view. So thank you very much for everybody for attending. And unless there's anything anybody wishes to raise as AOB, I will draw the meeting to a close. No? Okay. Thank you very much, one and all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks all.
Bye.